the Forged and Unbroken podcast.
Let's get after it. So let me even back up. Are you from the Philly area originally? Is that where you kind of started out from? Is that the fire service, starting point for Mr. Tim Anderson?
Yeah. So I'm a bit of a mutt. So I was raised in the North by Southern parents.
Okay.
Who were from Georgia, and then they promptly moved back south the week I graduated high school. So I was born and raised up there. I started in the fire service in 2001. That's kind of a funny story on its own. So I actually, I had like major random hip surgery. That's the spring of 2001, and was itching to join my volley house. And I got cleared to full duty to actually sign up on September 10th of 2001 and was planning to apply the next day. So obviously that got delayed a month or two just because of the nonsense of the world after 9/11. But that actually played a pretty huge sort of role on my intro to the fire service. Was entirely wrapped up in September 11th and what happened then and all the history and sort of folklore and everything that folklore is not a good word, but all the cultural shakeup of the fire service that happened right then was my intro. So, kind of an interesting way to get started. But I started as a volunteer when I was still in high school, and just fell in love with it from there.
Yeah, hell yeah. When was it that you was Philly your first choice?
Yes. So I graduated high school, wasn't planning yet on doing it as a career, went to college, only applied to schools that had fire departments that I could join while I was there. And by into my freshman year, sophomore year, I started taking entrance exams and took a couple different cities, all in the Northeast, but Philly was my number one choice. And Philly had, I think it's jumped around the last couple of years, but they had a residency requirement where you had to be a city resident for a year prior to even being hired. So I had to kind of after school, I moved back there, had to put all my eggs in one basket, and thankfully was able to get on within a year of getting out of school. But yeah, Philly I love Philadelphia. I always will. It's a very gritty, working class city. I just love it. I think it's got a lot of character, and was stoked to be able to get on the job there. The history of the department there, the way that they fight fires, has always been the way that I would do it. So I was blessed to be a part of that department.
That's super cool. I obviously being in the region I'm at, just a little bit further south, a lot of friends who came from that department or left ours to go back home to Philly. Just the culture growing up in that area. You explained it really well. Before we get into your assignment, could you just give some brief demographics of what Philly is? It's a major city department. It's one of the first locals out there.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like you said, it's steeped in history. So if you could, just basic demographics of the city, the rundown, assignments, sure, things like that, and then where you got assigned.
Yeah. So the city, official population wise, is always in the fifth or sixth biggest city in the country, depending on who's counting the given day, but roughly 1.5 to 2 million people, fluctuating daily based on people commuting in for work. The fire department has 60 firehouses, and when I got on, they had almost exactly 60 engines and 30 ladders. In 2008, there were a bunch of closures, and believe it or not, Philly has been reopening those companies. I think there's only 1 or 2 left, so we're pretty darn close to getting back to 30 trucks and 60 engines, which is awesome. There's not a lot of fire departments reopening stations that got closed. So
that's awesome.
Politics aside, plenty I disagree with, but I'm thankful that the mayors the last couple of years and the bosses have seen that as a priority. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's a hazmat unit that's a engine and ladder company double house that then will become the hazmat unit when they have a hazmat incident. They've got a bunch of other trucks that they then bring. And then there are 3 special ops units from the sort of rescue side of things. So there's a dedicated heavy rescue that's kind of in the center, and then 2 squad companies, one on the north side, one on sort of the southwest side, that are both special ops units and then first due engine companies. So they kind of have dual purpose there. But that's kind of the breakdown of the department.
Yeah, nice. Where did you end up getting assigned out of the academy?
Out of the academy, I went to Engine 16 in West Philly. So it's kind of in the northern part of West Philadelphia. Single engine house with a very diverse local. It covers the sort of the south side of part of Fairmount Park up there from from Will Smith's Summertime song.
Yeah.
Called the Plateau is where everybody goes. That's Belmont Plateau. So we were first due there, but also on the highway all the time. Also had some really low income neighborhoods. So it was a good house with some good guys. I really enjoyed it there. Put in ticket after ticket to go to a ladder company and just never worked.
Yeah.
But wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. Right. Is that now, I know we're fast forwarding a little bit to 2018. Were you at the same house or had you changed assignments?
No, in 2013, in 2012, I went through, end of 11 into 2012, I went through Philadelphia Special Operations School. The way Philly does it is you can't set foot on any of those apparatus until you're fully trained, which though is expensive and difficult, I think is a good way to do things. So everybody there is fully spun up, but you have to do like an interview process, application, all that kind of good stuff. And then they kind of create a technical rescue school and they put everybody through technician level and all the disciplines that are relevant to what we're doing. And then after that point, you can then, apply to go to a SOC unit as opportunities open up. And so in 2013, I went to Squad 72, which is the squad company in North Philadelphia.
Nice. And for your SOC companies, is it the same level of training and expertise? And I'll explain it this way, like where I'm at, our SO companies, they all have a basic curriculum, and it's not basic. I mean, they have basics that they all have to meet, but then certain companies, depending on if they're satellite, like this is more so the Swift Waterhouse, and this is more the trench rescue, or like, is everybody like the standard is a standard? Everybody's at the same spot.
Yeah, and Philly standard is the standard, with the exception of the hazmat company is a dedicated hazmat. Mm-hmm. Both the squad companies are also, everybody there is hazmat tech qualified, and our second apparatus has more hazmat equipment on it. The heavy rescue does not have a defined hazmat capability to it. But other than that, everybody is the same level. Everybody's operate the same.
Yeah, neat. Okay. Now, moving forward to 2018. So we have the Matt Letourneau incident, mm-hmm. the line of duty, and you were assigned to Squad 72 that night. Mm-hmm. Now, I actually, you do this job long enough, time starts to compress a little bit. I didn't even put two and two together. That was in the same year that Nate passed away. Obviously, you were 6 months ahead. Now, could you just start explain the incident from like dispatch area, and then we can just break this thing apart. And I'm sure I'm going to have some questions here, but it was, sure. I think it was one of those things, obviously, that changes lives, changes department culture, and obviously changed you in the trajectory of your life. Not to put words in your mouth.
No. Yeah, totally. No, I'm happy to do that. So when I talk about the Matt Letourneau fire, I usually give sort of 3 disclaimers, so I'll give them here again anyway. Yeah. The first is that Matt was very into the job. He was a student of the game. He was also a very involved instructor. He taught a bunch of places. He was involved in a bunch of the UL stuff. They did a lot of their work in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, which borders Philly to sort of the southwest. And he started he kind of grew up in the Delaware County area, so he was real involved in there, but was involved in a lot of those burns they did down there. So anyway, all that to say that, these things are always weird to talk about, but I think he would want it talked about. So, I think there's good justification there in and of itself. Yeah. But yeah, he'd want lessons learned shared. The second thing is that, any successes from that day were because of a bunch of studs working, least of which, was me. It was great team working that day. And any of the mistakes from that fire, I'll talk about on my own. There's always issues there, but I'll just get into my own crap there. But yeah, so this was, we just had the anniversary of it last week. So this was in January 2018. It was wicked cold. It was one of those deals where, like, Northeast winters, they're usually one way. There's either like no snow or there's like snow every week for the whole time, and it's really, really freaking cold. And it was the latter. So there's been snow and ice on the ground for at least a couple of weeks. I think the actual air temperature was like 9 or 10 degrees plus the wind chill. So it was a bit sporty outside that morning. The job came in, it was dispatched around 8:50-ish something a.m. There'd already been an all hands, maybe an all hands plus job in Southwest Philly that morning. So yeah, busy day to start things out. But yeah, it was a 2-story middle of the row occupied dwelling. It was about 100 to 130 years old. And though it was occupied, it wasn't vacant, but the gas and electric were both shut off and had been for some time. Place was in disrepair. It's in the heart of North Philadelphia. So if anybody's familiar, it's kind of not too far from Temple University, kind of in the neighborhoods there, but a 2-story middle of the road dwelling, a pretty small one. It's only like 15 by 35. So we're not talking about a huge house. Nothing like what you had to deal with on your job, but it couldn't be more bread and butter for us. Philly averages anywhere from 3 to 6 working fires a day in those types of dwellings every day, 365 days a year. So, this could not be more normal for us. Matt was the boss of Engine 45 that day. In fact, he was getting transferred to another company, and I think he might have been supposed to not even be there. And somebody else had something going on, and he offered to work that one last shift. So, all those bizarre stories always come out of these things. But either way, he was pushed in, and they could not make the turn onto the street because of the ice and the snow and the way the cars were parked. It was a tight block already, and they were unable to make the turn. But either way, they had heavy fire coming out of the first floor, and they stretched down the street. Philly does, when we can't get it with a pre-connect, most Philly engines are either using a 150 to 250 long pre-connect. We'll have a couple different sizes. And if not, we're dragging 3-inch hose line to a bag, like a bundle load of inch loader. So they stretched 3-inch and their bundle load down the street, and immediately had problems on a couple fronts. So one, the occupant of the house was behind the front door. He ultimately died, but they had difficulty forcing the front door because he was literally up against it. But then the water problem started. So Engine 45, his engine company, lost water on, I think it was the 3rd hydrant they finally actually got to function. Wow. And that was the same story for the second due engine company. So Rescue 1 was coming from the job in Southwest. They were still on that job. We got dispatched to this fire, made it almost there when Rescue 1 came available and responded. We kept going there, non-emergency, and then they went all hands. So we went ahead and I ended up supplying Engine 45 water from Squad 72's apparatus. I was driving that day and ended up getting them up and running again, and then helping them get to that 3rd hydrant to get them flowing. But the bottom line is that guys were kind of in and out in the initial stages of the fire. They finally got inside, real bad hoarding conditions, and for a long time they weren't even able to find the steps to the second floor. They were along the Bravo wall. It's usually pretty straightforward in these houses to find where the stairs are, but there was just so much clutter and material in there. But they pulled everybody out around 20 minutes into the job with the typical, evac announcement kind of thing. And then they re-entered once companies got water back. But that was not as clearly announced. And that's one of the lessons just in general. Like, we're real good at pulling people out. I don't think we're real good at having that same sort of announcement, like, okay, we are now back in interior firefighting mode. But I ended up on the roof at this point, and around I think it was 9:33, there was a spontaneous interior collapse. So this is now, I forget the actual numbers, but it's almost 40 minutes into the job that this occurs. I was operating on the roof, and at the time was under the impression that everybody was out of the place. The actual numbers escape me, but somewhere around 7 to 10 people were inside the house at the time. They just started to make the second floor. So they had 2 guys on the steps, one with a hose line, and a third guy had just made it onto the hallway on the second floor. He rode the collapse down. So basically everything from the kitchen, most row houses are kind of set up the same way. So you go in, there's like a living room, dining room, and a kitchen. This one was just living room and kitchen. It's a pretty small joint. But basically at that kitchen wall, everything came down in a V-shaped collapse that got progressively. So the worst of the impact was about 2/3 of the way through the house, and then it kind of worked its way back up towards the alpha side. But the guy on the second floor hallway rode the collapse down. He managed to see light out the rear kitchen door and self-extricate, losing his boots, losing his helmet, I think, in the process. Guys on the steps got hung up by everything. They managed to get a mayday out, both for the guy who went out the rear and for themselves. And then of the members operating on the first floor, a bunch of guys were able to walk right at the front door. Those guys also helped get the 2 guys trapped on the stairs out pretty quickly. This is in the first minute or so. And they cleared the mayday when the fireman who rode the collapse down, they cleared the mayday when he came out the back. One of the chiefs in the rear was like, we got him. And then outside, when they did a par check, they realized that Matt was missing. And then guys went in and relatively quickly were able to locate him because of his pass device. So that's kind of a synopsis of how we got to that point. Matt was still on the first floor with engine 45's line, and everybody made it out except him. So he was pinned just to the delta side of the impact zone of the V-shaped collapse. So basically it came across his left shoulder, and it knocked him in a seated position. So he was found with his legs straight out in front of him, seated position, facing the Charlie side, with his head down to his chest, and basically all the debris coming across his helmet, left shoulder, and SCBA.
He's in the bottom of the V.
Yes, he's not right smack where it meets the ground. He's kind of to the edge of it.
Yeah.
So
okay.
If he had been 2 feet to his right, he would have had a crazy story.
Right.
But he wasn't 2 feet to the right. So, but yeah, I was on the roof when this happened, and there wasn't a clear, once they realized he was in there was not a clear, like, hey, we have a active mayday. So it took me a significant amount of time to even find out something was going on. I didn't know how much that time was until about a month ago when I finally got a hold of some of the footage and stuff. But I didn't make it off the roof and into the house for at least 15 minutes later. I'm still not sure on the entire timeline, but I got in the house somewhere around 9:50, and the collapse occurred at 9:33. So it was probably 9:35 or so. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but before they even realized he was missing. But anyway, so I eventually make it down there, and I'm driving. So my job and stuff like this is logistics to get the guys what they need. And so I went inside to try to have a face-to-face with my officer. They pulled everybody out but Squad 72 and Rescue 1. And I met my officer, kind of see Matt through the smoke. The place is still burning, so we never had good visibility at any stretch of the imagination. But I was just like, hey, what you got, what you need? And it was one of those like, all right, why don't we start with, we'll get some airbags, get some spreaders, stuff like that. Let's see what we can make happen. So I turned around to leave, and when I got to the front door, another firefighter had a set of first hydraulic spreaders, and he walked up and gave them to me. And I was like, in that moment, what I should have done is turned around, handed those off, and still gone ahead. We had another member of Squad 72 who's overtime that day coming down the street, and I was like, hey, go tell him to grab X, Y, and Z. and we're going to get started and see what we have. At that point, you don't know, like, hey, maybe this is a 30-second operation because you lift one thing and we're good. But yeah, I totally failed on doing my job there. But either way, I went back in to start working on Matt. And the first thing I distinctly remember, I had zero idea of the nature and severity of the collapse. The whole time I thought it was an isolated lean-to. I did not realize what was over our heads the whole time. And when I got to Matt, there's guys have been working in there for at least 10 minutes at this point.
And Tim, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to be clear. Are you guys coming in from the main level kind of top down into the collapse, or have you come from like a more below grade? You're coming in from the bottom side?
We're coming straight in the front door.
Yeah. Okay.
So it would just meet you about halfway down the dwellings where you would run into.
Okay.
Like all the floor joists split in half. And so they got gradually less split as you went back to the alpha side.
Yeah. Okay.
So you had head space until about halfway down the dwelling. And so yeah, went to get hands on Matt, and I'll never forget this. Like you just have this feeling that like you're going to be able to move this guy, like you should be able to do this. And he was completely immovable, completely immovable. One of the other firemen had already put a rescue strap on his SCBA, and you've got all these guys here surging with adrenaline. He's right there, and it's like, all right, we should be able to just grab this guy, and you couldn't wiggle him, you couldn't budge him, and that was a very humbling moment. So we started the extrication, trying to do some lifting, and one of the most difficult things, when you do collapse training, it's usually in some sort of concrete burn building or lifting this slab kind of thing. Fire ground collapses, at least in wooden or type 3 buildings, are very, very, very different than your typical building collapse scenario. So because first of all, the impact of the collapse fractured the floor joists going between the first floor and the basement, which we were unaware of. But in a hoarding condition, it's basically like trying to lift off a sponge. So you have this squishy foot deep layer of crap, of clothing, burnt up furniture, and the whole sort of muck of burn up wood, drywall, plaster and lath, that kind of conglomerate. One of the Baltimore guys coined the phrase black sand after the Stricker Street incident. Yeah. Really applicable to this. So trying to do a lift was really, really hard. There's nothing to push against. We had to get some cribbing in there, but basically the first thing we did, we couldn't access the front of his body. So we were working from the back of him. We couldn't, the way his SCBA was trapped, we had to extricate him from his SCBA, and we basically used Hurst hydraulic cutters for vehicle extrication. We cut his right shoulder strap, cut his waist belt with a knife, and after doing a lift on one of the floor joists using spreaders or ram, I can't remember which, we were finally able to access his face, his mask, and kind of lay him down to his right side. And so this is going on a while before we even accessed the front of him. So he, at that point we were able to get his mask off. It was pretty obvious what we were dealing with at this point. But we still were unable to move him at all. So we basically had to then work systematically, and this is in a void between the delta wall and the collapse, kind of push off each floor joist individually with rams. I think we used 2 rams and a set of spreaders, joist by joist, until we got him all the way down to his ankles before we could slide him out.
Jeez.
So it was really difficult. The whole time the place is still burning, so the visibility was crap. None of us were on air because we couldn't have fit in there with air packs on had we wanted to. And you're working on your knees, like kind of bent over in this little void. So it was totally exhausting as it was. We did not put air on him. None of us were on air. You can argue the however you want on that, but he was not breathing at that point. It took over an hour for the extrication to be complete. So I know the medics worked him, but he was declared deceased at the hospital there. The one of the more humbling moments in this whole thing was halfway through, like I keep a carabiner clipped to my mic clip on my coat, and I wanted to take that carabiner off to try to rig something to pull, and he was wearing a harness, like an integrated harness in his bunker pants, to try to put a strap on there and pull him. And I looked down at it and I couldn't do it. I was too exhausted. I was like, I need every little ounce of energy here, and I can't do the simplest of tasks. And that's like, I'm a rope nerd, so like taking carabiners off stuff is not a thing that's hard for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll never forget looking down at it at the corner of my eye and be like, yeah, I can't do that right now. And that was pretty insane. So, the fire started, everybody was rolling around 8:50 in the morning. The extrication's done at around 10:30. So it's an hour and a half long event of active work for everybody involved in the extrication. Like you're either fighting the fire or working on the extrication for an hour and a half straight, in pretty tough conditions. So yeah, that's kind of a rundown. Let's see, what else do I want to hit? Yeah, so the lessons learned, work your position. By me not going out and doing that, it took a lot longer for us to get the stuff that we needed. Our truck was down an icy block and down another half block to the right. Rescue One's apparatus was down that block and up 3 blocks, all up snowy, icy streets. So somebody's got to run that. I think, A, I dropped the ball, but B, what I would do differently is, everybody wants to help out in one of these events. So like take an engine and ladder company, like, yo, go to that apparatus and just strip it and puke it up in front of this house. Like, I don't care what it is, just grab every stick of equipment off that truck and don't stop until it's in a pile out front. And so we at least have that. There was a line of duty death of a guy named Sean Williamson in summer of 2022 in Philadelphia, who was also killed in a building collapse. And I wasn't there at the time. I'd already left. But from what I understand, they had a much better logistical operation. The guys changing saw blades out, like they were rotating saws off the pile. Like it was, and that's what really needs to happen at one of these kind of collapse events. So heavy reliance on logistics. Again, that a building, a structure fire collapse is not a tech rescue collapse. They're just totally different environments. And so it's much more similar, like sort of the entombment is much more similar to like a trench rescue where like you've got to expose their big toe before you're moving them. You can't just grab them and pull them. It's just too much. They're too wrapped up in stuff. And it's generally not going to be as simple as like, we're going to lift this one beam and now this guy's out. I mean, sometimes that happens. I know there's been, especially since being in North Carolina, there's been a couple of Maydays here, both before I got here and some recently where it was a relatively simple, like, hey, we're pinned by this one thing and they move that one thing and they're good. This was not that kind of job. So yeah, that's kind of the rundown on it.
Yeah. Man, I really appreciate the breakdown, the lessons learned, and especially just leaning into what you're calling like failures and how we can just learn from that. So many people might be averse to that. So thank you for your like honesty. It's interesting. There are so many parallels, talking to some colleagues in St. Louis about some line of duties they had with just the dig out process, or I can relate to the exhaustion piece and just having trouble with what is normally bread and butter things for you. And then just even my friends and colleagues over in Baltimore cities, I know you've gotten close with, just so many similarities, and you're in this situation that few experience, but it happens to us. And it becomes like a very much a higher tier skill set operation. And maybe you can correct me on this. Like these collapses and dig out ops during these Maydays and line of duties they're stroking on everything, like the equipment cache that you need, the physical exhaustion, the mental exhaustion, the duration in the structure. You have to be firing on all cylinders, and you have to have really great crews to be able to overcome these obstacles. Like this is not a simple operation. Like I'm I'm almost at a loss for words here for just the amount of work that needs to have happen. And it's neat to see where I've been on the back end for some of the people in our region doing these advanced rescue schools and showing these dig out processes and showing how labor intensive and tool intensive and time intensive it is. It's unreal, man. And we just cannot take these things for granted, because when it does happen, so many things need to line up.
Yeah. I mean, Philly, unfortunately, is we've had a lot of collapse related line of duty deaths and maydays and injuries. I mean, it's just the Northeast building stock in general is so aging and hasn't been cared for. And, the Sean Williamson line of duty death, the fire was out. It was a 1-story standalone, which means that, for those who aren't familiar with row house construction, it means that it used to have another row house next to it that has been demolished. This was a corner property that used to have a delta exposure, and now it's just a standalone. It's by itself, and it just spontaneously collapsed in a pile. Like you can't predict it. And this was an occupied place. This was like a pizza shop with apartments above. Like, and some of the pictures that go around of, stuff in Philly, stuff in Baltimore, like just the everyday building stock. If it rains for 3 days in Philly, there's building collapse responses. And so Philly's no stranger to it. We've had a bunch of them. There were, while I was still there, there were 2 guys killed in the collapse in, I think, 2012. You had Matt, you had Sean Williamson after me. It's something that unfortunately happens a bunch there. And it's like you say, like it is, it's an epic lift. No pun intended. Like it's it's a lot of work. And it's intense work. It's not, I don't know. There's a lot.
How is that working without your mask on? Still active fire. I mean, even when fires are out, I mean, the CO in a lot of these structures is still in like hundreds of parts per million on top of all the other things you are dealing with. I know it's Stricker Street. You're dealing with like the furniture and kitchen that basically are just piled down into the bottom of the collapse of the V. What was that like? What kind of toll was that metabolically and then potentially emotionally, having to deal with the hoarding conditions, but then also no BA on because you needed the mobility, but still having active fire?
Yeah. So a couple things. So the ATF said they took like 5 tons of material out of the second floor of this place. Wow. Which is insane. I mean, and there are a lot of issues with that. So the inside, outside, because of water and the extreme cold. So we, at times there were flowing lines from outside, and we should have been tipped off to the fact that, hey, no water is running out of the front door of this place, but the contents were absorbing a lot of the water. So there's a lot of weight involved. You also had this cold smoke phenomenon that they talk about in the NIOSH report. Like basically at certain temperatures, the smoke looks white. So it kind of gives a false sense of progress. Like, all right, we're getting a knock on this one. Actually, we're not. It's still rocking. Thankfully, most of the fire was knocked down on the first floor. So we weren't like, there wasn't like fire over our heads this whole time kind of thing. The second floor was still whipping pretty good, and there were flowing lines from outside onto that. But it was still that overhaul, like white, steam, smoke. You can see the pictures they have of the structure, as we're working in there. As far as the exposure, I'm super curious. I would love to know, because we were in there for, the guys who were in there the whole time were in there an hour. I was in there at least 40, 45 minutes before we came out. And we kept trying. Like we asked for fans. At one point they had fans blowing, and we brought a hose line in the front door to fog out the front window to hydraulically ventilate, but the wind kept shifting. So we never made any progress with actually getting lift. Not to mention the fact that the lack of visibility, we had like a foot or 2 visibility. So you can't see anything, and you don't really know what you're working with. And you're trying to do this sort of complex extrication in such poor visibility. So pretty difficult working conditions. I distinctly remember, so after we got him out, we kind of took up what equipment we could and left the fire ground relatively quickly. And they started sending units back to to one firehouse in the neighborhood to kind of like start debriefs kind of stuff. And they bought a bunch of pizzas. And I remember the pizzas showed up and everyone kind of looked at it like, is this a time to be eating lunch kind of thing? And I was like, screw you guys. And I like inhaled like 5 slices of pizza, like right there. Like, I just think remember this, like, I was like, I must consume calories right now. Like,
Yeah.
like I remember like I'm washing my face off and digging in, like I'm starving. So I would kill to know, I was not wearing a Whoop or a, I have a Garmin watch now. I didn't have any of that stuff back then. I'd kill to know like where my pulse rates were and, all that kind of good stuff, but I don't have any of that data. But it was, and I mean, at some point, like, the extrication was long enough to have that sort of pullback and holy crap, I'm in the middle of this extrication right now kind of moment. Like, and we all knew Matt was dead. It was like one of those, like, we threw in a couple like hang in there, buddy, we're getting you out kind of things that felt very forced.
Yeah.
Because we just knew, like, everybody's done this job long enough, and eventually you're like, yeah, that guy's dead. And fortunately, Matt had passed. I don't know. Like it's a strange emotion. Like the other thing too, these events aren't easy. They're also things that we train for a lot. And I'm curious, for you, like you guys did a pretty gnarly extrication. You have this weird emotional thing of like, wow, that was really crazy. I think we did a pretty good job considering the circumstances, but oh wait, my friend's dead. So it's this really weird conflicting, like we all train for this day. And, if we take the job seriously, this is the day that we want to be good at. And so there's this weird, like, okay, I think we did a good job in the circumstances. How do I wrestle with that emotion while also the emotion of the loss of what just happened and how horrific it is? It's a weird emotional mix-up.
I completely understand what you're talking about. That was kind of playing in the back of my mind. One of my best friends, Andy, was the first to Nate, and Andy will tell you as soon as he laid hands on him, he knew. And when I came up there, I mean, I think we all knew. There's always that kind of, like you said, like, hang on, buddy. There's always that little shred of hope, thinking like, sometimes these medics pull absolute miracles and do amazing things and pull out every trick in the book. And you're like, oh my God, something amazing happened here. But having that, that was at play. So, in the back of our minds, yes, we know. And then, the mental, emotional side of it, of having to go through, man, we did some really incredible things. We almost, our team almost got. Having pride in what we did and making it out, but then also we would have people tell us like, no, listen, he didn't live, so it wasn't a successful rescue. Like there's a lot of, just a lot of mix up there. It's no pun intended. It is very dirty. It's not clean. It's not straightforward. There are high highs and low lows. And they kind of all happen at the same time. It's very odd. It's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, you have those, I wish I could have done more. I wish, what could I have done more? What if I had done a better job working my position? Well, we've gotten them out of there faster. Had I been on the roof and said, I'm still really confused on the timeline now. I'm even more confused after some of the stuff that I saw a couple weeks ago when I finally got my hands on some video and some stuff. But I remember a time on the roof when I literally put my hand on my mic to tell the chief to get everybody out of this place. We had already gotten off the roof of the original. We're on the Delta. It was spongy, but there was a hose line in the rear flowing water. I was like, he's already got everybody out of here. I don't need to add any radio traffic to this. So I didn't say anything. Now, my timeline's so confused now that may have been after the collapse already occurred. But for the last 7 years, I have thought that was before the collapse occurred. So it's like, all these things of, okay, what could I have done differently to prevent this? And the interesting, like Matt died of positional asphyxiation. He didn't have a broken bone in his body.
Wow.
So basically way he was pinned, the way his head was pinned to his chest, he couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And so it's like, all right, if there's some way we could have released the pressure on him sooner, maybe we, but at the end of the day, the building fell on his head, and there's like, that's going to happen. Like, if that fire, like I said, Philly does that fire every single day. And it's like, every once in a while we're going to lose. So how do you make peace with that? How do you operate in those realities, day in and day out?
Yeah. So much of what you said, just so many common themes between our line of duties and Baltimore and St. Louis. And I'm just replaying these things in my head. And I remember thinking when we were wrapping up, I remember having this thought before I even left the fire ground was, there's going to be crazy investigations out of this. Please, dear God, do not take firefighting away from us.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, like, this is a bread and butter fire. You talk to the city, you talk to a lot of men and women around the country that are doing these high risk calls really frequently and pulling, vagrants out of what we think are vacant buildings or just, and I was so fearful that they were going to take firefighting away because somebody died. And I'm glad they didn't. I think our department handled it pretty well. But as you said, like, these are things that we do all the time, and nature's going to do what it does. And sometimes, we are on the short end of that stick. Yeah,
for sure.
Two quick questions before we start switching gears. The one is more of a practical question of, if he's towards the bottom of the V, how was it that you actually got him out once his body was freed? Is it just muscle power bringing him up out of the V? Was there a rope? Was it a small system? Was it just, how was that?
Yeah. So the V is coming down from the second floor, and he was on the first floor. So he's basically next to it. So if the V is dead center in the living room of this place, we were operating, he was in the delta side of the impact zone of the V, and we were operating in the void created by along the delta wall of the collapse. I can send you some photos too later. Okay. But so we were just in that void. Once we got him out, so we put a couple of different rescue straps on him, and we got a plastic bottom Stokes basket, and we're able to kind of just kind of, again, it's almost like a maybe an avalanche is the best. It's like it created like this little tunnel around like his body, and we had to lift the load off that and then kind of slide him out. Like, his legs are, all wrapped up in all of this fire debris. So, again, that trench collapse, like, that kind of is what you're looking at, is kind of what it pictured. Like, we had to kind of slide his body out of this conglomerate of junk. Yeah. And once we were able to lift him, once we were able to lift the joists off of that area, we were able to physically slide him out, pulling on his harness, pulling on the strap on his chest, pulling his legs, and just kind of flop him into the Stokes basket. And then from there, it was 15, 20 feet to the door. It wasn't far.
Okay.
So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. That helps explain that. And then the other thing was, I know for myself, metabolically, I know we've nerded out on this, the physiological and metabolic demands, the adrenaline dump. My body wasn't right for 2 weeks. I slept well because I had the physical outlets, but just being so exhausted and just slammed. I mean, mine was 10 to 14 days. You talk to Chief Rudisell from Linden Heights in Baltimore City. I mean, he'll tell you he was done for at least a week. These are all very common. Do you recall for you or any of your people just not feeling right, and not obviously from the emotional side of it, but just the adrenaline dump and the toll that it takes on your body?
So to add to the complexity of this for me personally, this was my first morning back to work after having my third kid.
Oh, wow.
After a horrific pregnancy and like post, thankfully my kid was fine. My wife went through a bunch of hard stuff. So I literally walked into my house a couple hours after this event and was handed a newborn. It was like, all right, your turn. And I remember being like, where am I? Like, what planet am I on right now? Like, this is just, like, you can't make this up. It's like I've had a week. I can't really be like, I've had a tough day at work. I mean, this was literally I'd been off of 4 weeks. I'd been off a month after having this kid. And that was my first morning back to work. And so I don't even remember, because I'm going right into newborn.
Yeah.
Wife was still really sick. I don't even know.
Yeah. You were already kind of in that super strap zone anyway.
Yeah. So trying to process it, physically, I was going to, be up all night with the kid. I did sleep that night. Interestingly, both, from an exhaustion and just an emotional side, there was a line of duty death of Joyce Craig back in 2013, 2014. Mm-hmm. I missed that fire. It was my group. My guys did the extrication. I had taken the night off for a training event. And I didn't sleep that night at all. And I wasn't even there. That fire had a whole lot of maps was pretty cut and dry. We fought the fire, the building fell down. The Joyce Craig job had a lot more drama to it. To put it mildly, of things that went wrong that necessarily shouldn't have. But that job, the building collapsed, and there's not. It was kind of we could make peace with the why pretty quickly. Sometimes buildings fall down. There wasn't a whole lot of. You could have argued, and I think especially from the incident command perspective, the chief in charge of that fire is somebody I have tremendous respect for. He's actually now the commissioner of Philly. He's now Philly's fire commissioner.
Oh, awesome.
He was the commanding chief at that time. He was one of my lieutenants in the academy and somebody that I've respected from day one. But, if you're in his shoes, that difficulty, all right, should I pull the guys out sooner? Should I have done whatever? And you can argue all that till you're blue in the face. But for everybody else, it was a firefight that was progressing, and building fell. So
we can do everything right, and sometimes bad things still happen.
Exactly.
The Joyce Craig, I use that one a ton in training, and I'm obviously only coming at it from what I know in the NASH report and any internal reports and whatever else I can find. That one, I just highly recommend people to lean into that one. It's
for sure.
Yeah, it's eye-opening. There are catastrophic things that can happen to you and your BA, even when you do a lot of things right, and to be able to manage that just from the tactic side of things under pressure is super important. That's a whole other rabbit hole. That'd be an amazing one to talk about. But was this the impetus for ARS and what came out of this?
No, so ARS already existed at this point.
Okay.
So the ARS got started with the multi-loop rescue strap, and I first designed it in SOC school, and Matt and I were in SOC school together. So it was with him in some of the same scenarios that I was like, hey, I need something that's simpler. So part of our special operations school, so we have, you do all the technician level and rope, con space, collapse, water extrication, et cetera, et cetera. And then they have a hellacious week of survival and firefighter rescue. They just call it the Fireground Special Operations Week. So they get into a lot of RIT stuff. There's a lot of sort of complex, like trench cutting and all that kind of, stuff that they train on. But a lot of it is focused on firefighter rescue. And, everybody carries a piece of webbing. That's pretty standard. But webbing just doesn't work well when you can't see, can't feel, and your pulse is 200. It's just hard to work with. So I was like, all right, I need something. If the best I'm going to do is girth hitch somebody, then I need a tool that's easy to girth hitch with. So that is where the multi-loop rescue strap came from. My wife could sew, and so I had her make one up. Did some messing around with it, and then other people wanted one too, and I was like, all right, whatever. Originally, I tried to license it off. I tried to just say, hey, anybody want to make this and give me 25 cents each time you do it or something. But but nobody cared. And so eventually I started having them made, and we officially founded ARS in January 1 of 2016. So almost exactly 2 years before this event.
Wow.
We used several multi-loop rescue straps on Matt. It was the first documented firefighter Mayday situation. So that was talking about an emotional mess.
Man.
Like the first time it was ever used was used on a friend of mine who was with me when I designed it. And it, you know, I'd even say, like, I generally try not to, it's enough times past that it is what it is, but like, I don't like to use that kind of thing as promotional material, but it's like, okay, it worked well. Like, you know, we had no visibility. And, you know, even guys who hadn't seen it from other companies who were involved, you know, the one guy was telling me, the one guy was like, oh, where's the end of this thing? Like, just keep going. You'll feel the handle. Like, you know, it's, so the first time it was ever used on a firefighter was that job. And it worked well. I mean, it's, you know, the three words that drive that thing are simplicity under stress. And that's what like, you know, as you live through, as I lived through, like, you know, none of this complex stuff is going to work. It's just not. The conditions are too sporty and we're human. I don't care how much of a CrossFit ninja you are. There's there's an environmental and operational factor to the human factor of this that you're not going to overcome. So simplicity has to be king. And I was very thankful that it worked the way it did. So the ball was already rolling at that point with ARS, but that was definitely it brought everything home that I had already been thinking about. And the reasons why I designed it the way I did, kind of confirmed a lot of the stuff that I was thinking, but it definitely changed. Now, I was really interested in mental performance for this stuff for years, based on stuff that Leadership Under Fire started back in 2012. And it was heavily influenced by them, like great guys doing great work. And then, you know, you do all that reading, you do all that thinking about stuff, and then you live one of these things and it's like, holy crap. All right. How should we then live? Like, based on experience, like, how do we put all this together? And so it has always shaped kind of how I design equipment, how I think about training, and you know, similarly, just the importance of the mental side of things. Like, that's what, you know, looking at training, like the mental side of this has got to be the keystone component. And if it's, you know, we can train how to move a down fireman. So like the mental performance piece of this whole thing is so vitally important. It's got to be the foundation. It's got to be kind of the keystone, because it's, you know, you can train how to move a firefighter. You can train how to move them upstairs. You can train how to do the Denver drill, how to throw them out a window, whatever. But if you can't talk about how to do that within the constraints of humanity, essentially, then it's all for naught. I
know we've nerded out on this. We're cut from the same cloth in this regard, where you can't just sit there and say, oh, I have a good skill set in controlled environments in the engine bay. It is where we are whole human beings. Sometimes we're messy human beings. And when game day hits, it's a culmination of everything that you are in that moment. All the baggage you have going on at home, all the skills you've built up over your time, your physical fitness, your ability to handle the adrenaline and have all those factors in your face, present all at once, and how effectively you can overcome that and still do really hard, amazing things to mitigate the problem. It just cannot be understated. It cannot be undervalued, because that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where success in these line of duties and these maydays are going to be realized. You know, Yeah. You and I have nerded out on this, you know, a fair amount, and I just, if there's any other call to action here, like, that's in the simplest form, I think that's it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to see that the fire service seems to be catching on. You know, like the work that you're doing, Leadership Under Fire. I see other folks out there having the conversations about mental performance and, you know, the physiological impact of Mayday response, and that's something that, you know, I'm very passionate about because of this. And it's got to be a factor. It's got to be part of the training, because it's, you know, firemen are very good about training tactile skills, but not super good about how the human element interfaces with tactile skills. And we got to get better at that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way to put it. Now you're just your one system, the ARS loop. or so my multi-strap loop has had numerous successful rescues. I think just in the last year, I've been watching rescue and off of roofs. I mean, you've even had animals like your product, now having been in the market for a little bit, is doing some amazing things. Like, do you know the number? Do you know some of the, not that we have to do any deep dives on any of the incidents, but you're putting a product out there, the rubber's meeting the road, and it's helping save lives. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, it's incredibly humbling to see the success of that, and it's really encouraging. I like it's kind of like the one good shot in golf that we were like, wait, I might actually play this again. For all the nonsense that it is running this business, and ARS, we haven't really talked about it, but ARS has essentially removed me from full-time firefighting as a career, which is not what I ever thought it would do. But yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. We don't want to make gimmicks, and we want stuff that works. The numbers, I have long ago lost track of the rescues that the strap has made. There was actually another grab in Philly yesterday. There's a house fire. It's used all over the place every day in EMS and vehicle extrications and water rescues, and it's been amazing to see it adopted. The number I do have, though, are real-world Mayday incidents. And as of last weekend, where there was another one in Pennsylvania, I haven't even really announced it yet because I'm still gathering details, but it's been involved in 8 real-world firefighter Mayday events.
It's amazing.
Which, I'm, like I said, I'm beyond humbled by the fact that it's working. So yeah, just this last weekend in Pennsylvania, a fireman fell through the floor at a fire and was inverted. He went head first through and was hung up by like wires and stuff. And they used a strap and a hose line to extricate him up out of that floor. Thankfully, he's okay. He had a couple minor burns, but is good. And they've released some information about it up there. I'm waiting to hear a little more about the mechanics of how they used it before I have announced it. But yeah, I mean it's crazy. It's like I said, it's very humbling, and it keeps us getting up out of bed every day, knowing that it works, that the simplicity is shining through, and it's functioning. So.
Yeah, I love that. And it's even, I see it adopted in law enforcement and military circles as well, correct?
It is. Another thing we haven't published, I got word from a contract combat medic in Ukraine that he used it in a trench warfare thing to drag a guy who'd been blown up by a drone attack through the trench and then out of the trench, and then subsequently the guy lived. So it's nuts. I mean, those are the things that you're like, man, never saw any of this stuff happening, but
man,
yeah, here we are.
I'm so amped up for you. That is, I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? And I know when I'm sure running your business, there are days where that, the business is going to do what it does. And it's, sometimes you get stressed out. I'm sure that you've had those moments where you're like, why am I doing this? And then you have things like this that come up in your plate, like, there it is. And
it gets you back to the mission.
Exactly.
And it's, when the best thing I can do is get a phone call like, yo, Tim, we used your stuff and it was great. And we rescued somebody with it. Like that's what keeps you going. And keeps us focused.
That's awesome. So, what was the change, or how did that come about? How did that evolve when you had to come to the decision point of, do I keep doing the fire thing, or do I go all hands onto this? So we have a whole product line. The strap was the first thing we made and is kind of our like flagship product, but we have a bunch of rope bags we make for tech rescue. We have some pulleys we make for rope rescue that are used a bunch by the military world. We have some kits we make for RIT and roof op stuff. So it kept growing. I often joke, I was like, I should have rolled over in bed and forgotten this whole thing. But alas, here we are, and the Lord seemed fit to give me some more ideas. So
None of this is my stuff, but yeah, basically, we had no family in 500 miles. I had 3 little kids. I had 2 full-time jobs, and that math wasn't adding up. So we moved to North Carolina in the fall of 21 to get closer to family. And, my original plan was, all right, I'll do some part-time fire stuff and do ARS full-time. Since being down here, I missed it too much. I got back in and did about a year and a half full-time again. And unfortunately, I hit the exact same conclusion. I was never seeing my family. I was going from work to work to work to work.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't sustainable. Again, this was not the path that I saw for myself, but I'm thankful that what we're doing is hopefully having an impact. And yeah, I'm still struggling with, what my relationship with fire service is. And I'm trying to find a good, part-time volunteer kind of situation to stay involved. But right now, ARS has been growing so stinking fast that it owns me right now. So, but we'll get there eventually. But yeah, it's exciting, but it's hard. Again, it's just not where Tim Anderson's plan was going. But sometimes the Lord has a different direction for you. So
yeah, sure.
We are.
Seems like that's unfolding in real time for sure, man. Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I just saw you post the other day too that some of your equipment's being used. I mean, right now, as a timestamp for what's happening globally or just nationwide, is we have the California wildfires with like the big Palisades and the Kenneth and the Eaton fires all happening. I think there's like 5 fires happening all at once, and you got your equipment working out there. Like it's throughout I was going to say the American Fire Service, but it's throughout the world now doing good things.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like I said again, it's very humbling. We're just trying to keep pushing. Keep the head above water, and we've got other stuff in the pipeline that we're excited about. We released a new rope bag yesterday that's for kind of smaller diameter stuff, so it's good for like tactical folks and search and rescue people, water rescue. So we put a lot of time into that design, and we're pretty stoked about it. We got other stuff in the works, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, cool. And I saw that you're at the point now where you're hiring.
Oh yeah, no, I have 11 employees right now.
Oh wow.
We started our own. All of our stuff is made in the U.S. I'm very proud of that fact.
Awesome.
I will never deviate from that. And now that I'm in the U.S. manufacturing, I feel all the more passionate about it. So everybody who listens to this should really start paying attention to where the tags on their stuff is coming from.
Hell yeah.
But about a year and a half ago, we started making stuff ourselves in our own sewing shop. So at this point, about 80 to 90% of all ARS soft goods are made at our own shop here in North Carolina. So I employ 6 sewers right now, and that's just been unreal. Like the ability to the quality control, the ability to prototype stuff out. We can have an idea 1 hour and have it in our hands 2 hours later. It's just taken it to another level. And it hasn't been an easy lift, but starting from scratch, basically building a factory, but we're very excited about it and very proud of the fact that our stuff is coming from here. Our ARS employees pay taxes, they drink Yingling traditional lager, and I think that matters. I really do.
I'm with you, man. They're bought in.
We're looking at our culture, and it's like, really? So most of your money is going to the country that we are literally publicly preparing for war with. All right, we need to start making some different decisions.
Yeah. I really appreciate that.
So people need to start asking questions. We're like, it's more expensive. It is. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. But like I said, our sewing needles are bald eagle feathers, and we're proud of that. So, but anyway, awesome. Like I said, I get a little passionate about that. But
yeah, I love it, man. I absolutely love it. One of my good friends whom I've worked with, Kurt Vines, used to always say, buy once, cry once. And that's something that really resonated with me. You got to, it's worth the investment, because you buy something that's not vetted or just poor quality, and you saved a couple bucks, but when it's a piece of equipment that really, really matters, and that it's your life or somebody else's life depends on it, or it's something that it's at home that you can pass down to your kids, or you can just have for the rest of your life, like that matters. That quality and keeping it here in the country, man. It's important. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time, going from the culture in Philly to the Laterno and the lessons, and then what Anderson Rescue is doing now, and just your awesome mission. Is there anything else that you want to close with, or something that you feel compelled that we hadn't talked about yet?
Yeah, I mean, thank you again just for the opportunity to chat about this. There's so many other nerd out wormholes we could go down, especially about mental performance and stuff.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that we talk about with our training and with our equipment and everything is reality. Like it has to work in reality. And if the equipment you're buying, the training you're getting, isn't vetted in that world, then you don't know if it's going to work. And so, what we need to be doing as the fire service is looking at that question. Like, what is reality? What is reality defined by? And how do we operate accordingly? So, yeah, I mean, my personal experience has led me to, it's got to be simple. Simplicity is the key, I think, in all of this stuff. And if you focus on simplicity, they always say that, like, the tier 1 military units are so good because they're so good at the basics. Yeah. And so, I think that's what we need to focus on. The complex stuff is fun. It looks sexy on Instagram, but yeah, where our mindset needs to be is on what's the simplest way and most efficient way to accomplish X, Y, and Z, and be really good at that. Because it will bite you in the rear end. I mean, as both of us have experienced, this, any sunny morning can bring a change of events that you didn't expect. So
yeah, no, absolutely. That's a greatest place to wrap this up, man. I will, if as time allows, I would love to have you back on, because I know you and I have been sending stuff to each other back and forth, digging into the mental performance stuff, and you've got some really cool ways to describe it and talk it out and plan for it. And I think we're both have a similar mission in mind. So I would love to have you back on at some point, and we can do a deeper dive just on that. We'll zero in on that one day. Yeah, that'd be super cool.
For sure.
But hey, appreciate you, man. This has been great.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, man. So